these calm little moments before the storm.
Black, we got the key to the city.
Basically, jungle comes from the UK, for the most part. There's a lot of domestic producers now, but jungle came from the UK. Our word jungle, as I understand it, came from the fact that at the time that people were messing around with hyped up breakbeats and raga bass lines, which is what jungle had kind of started out as, they were a lot of people that had come from Jamaica, and there's a section of Kingston, Jamaica that they call the concrete jungle. There was a tape that was sampled of a Jamaican sound system where the guy was saying, "All a junglist," and that song became really good. The song became really popular, and so therefore the music took on the label jungle. Anything that had a hyped up breakbeat and a deep bass line became known as jungle. And I don't know why the name is stuck. I mean, it's kind of more or less become drum and bass, but that kind of still, to me, describes a specific kind of jungle. You know, it's all breakbeats, basically. It's just more advanced than the breakbeat that was coming out before.
Okay, the origins of jungle probably all began with acid house, which went into like techno house and breakbeat house. This is around 91, 92. Tracks were coming out with like the house beat, but they had a breakbeat behind them. And then eventually the house beat was taken out. Or actually, yeah, the house beat was taken out for jungle. The house beat stayed in for like say happy hardcore, or what became happy hardcore. I mean, you still had the 4/4 beat and you had the breakbeat behind it. But for jungle, the house beat dropped out and it was just the breakbeat. But it was fast. It got to be faster and faster, and it was like a lot faster than house, like 140, 150. Now it's 170, 180, and it went from like happy like breakbeat music into what's called dark side. This is like 93, very early 94, and it was fast breakbeats with like kind of dark, scary sounds to it. It was just like a backlash against all the happy music that was coming out at the time. And dark side eventually became what is now known as jungle today. I mean, it lost a dark influence when it became jungle, but I think it picked up more of a raga influence at the time. And it was just break beats and like a lot of raga, and that's where kind of like jungle like evolved from. This was like in 94. As far as jungle getting a name in Pittsburgh, I mean, early on, Deadly Buddha definitely had an influence in the scene, because I mean he was always into like break beats and stuff like that. He was into techno with break beats. He was in a breakcore, like just stuff that was really, like, I guess, breakbeat oriented. And he definitely supported it for what it was at the time.
Dieselboy, definitely, hands down. But even somewhat before him, there was a guy that Deadly Buddha spun with named DJ Control Awareness, who was from the UK. He was the guy that like introduced breakbeat here. And since jungle kind of like sprung from breakbeat, he kind of started that whole trend. Basically, he was getting records from his sister, who was still living in London and spinning on a pirate radio station called Fantasy FM. She would order 2 copies of each record and send him one. And therefore, we got all the freshest music from the UK. And when he left, the trend just continued. Dieselboy, and then later on, you know, I started producing things, and a few other people, you know, like now like Sine, we just continued the tradition. We've always been in the breakbeats.
But when it became jungle, I would say the people most responsible for giving it a big push in Pittsburgh were Underground Incorporated, or UDG, John and Ryan. I mean, they had their second parties, for instance, too, was half house, half jungle. I mean, they definitely had jungle DJs at all their parties, and you know, they really pushed it in Pittsburgh. They always made sure to support the music, so I have to give them props for pushing it.
Jungle's really made up of a couple different distinct parts. There's the bass line, which keeps the track moving and it catches people's attention. There's the beats, which is its foundation, really. It's a sped up amphetamine breakbeat loops, cut up, reorganized, stretched, looped, chopped, just manipulated by any means possible. And the music, or the string lines and the samples and things, which create the atmosphere of the song. So basically, you have fast beats that are just completely reorganized and revamped than you'd expect to hear, you know, typical drum beats.
It's futuristic, progressive, technological breakbeat music. It's like taking what hip-hop DJs started doing back in the 80s with electro and taking it to like the next level, like taking it into the next century. That's basically it. Jungle or drum and bass or tech step or whatever you want to call it is basically the extension of the technological progression that started back in the 80s with hip-hop. And when I say hip-hop, I mean early hip-hop, like electro, you know, stuff like that. It's just a natural, complete transition into the future.
The main kinds of jungle, you have jazzy or chill out, I guess, intelligent jungle, which is it's not as fast as most stuff. It's got maybe has some live instrumentation in it, like a live bass, live piano, something like that. And it's pretty mellow. It's stuff that you really wouldn't dance to primarily. You'd listen to it in a car, listen to it in your room or at home or whatever when you're relaxing.
The next category I'd probably go to is jump up, and I look at that as its name pretty much describes it. It's happy, kind of bouncy, kind of party music. It's like the closest equivalent that jungle has to like old party hip hop records.
Then there's tech step or dark jungle, which is staccato beats, a lot of menacing, distorted bass, really, strange, somewhat scary sounds.
I look at tech step as like Blade Runner jungle. This is like the kind of stuff that you'd hear at somewhere like at the end of the world, like at the end of the world, the apocalypse. And it sounds just like that. It's drums coming down all around, just overwhelmed by drums and bass. But even more so than drum and bass, it's distorted bass lines, really loud drums, things that almost sound industrial.
You have raga, which is similar to jump up, but rather than hip-hop samples, you're looking primarily towards a raga sample or full-on raga vocal. Then there's just straight-up hard step or drum and bass, which is, it's not really anything. It kind of takes from each. There's not a standout vocal. It's not too dark. It's not too mellow. It's just kind of right in the middle. It has like a perfect combination of elements, which just makes it like real rolling. So, this is the main different genres of jungle, all 5 or 4.
I guess people who don't know it when they first hear it, it sounds like a really fast form of music. It sounds, really, this speed of light almost. But the more you get into it, the more you listen to it, you catch the half speed feeling of it. I mean, whereas you have a tune going 180 BPMs with the bass line, in the equation, you can listen to it like it's only 90 BPMs and like it's a slower, like head nod type tempo.
It's not strictly rave music. There's so many different flavors of drum and bass that it's music for pretty much anybody, and you don't have to be a raver or whatever. There's just anything. Jungles just has too much going for it. Just too many sounds. It's not just rave music.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would say definitely the audience for jungle is probably a lot bigger cross-section of people than the audience for, let's say, house or other forms of techno. For the main reason that it appeals to a lot of different people because it's got influences from all over the world. I mean, you can find jungle that has a little bit of something in it, from wherever, and I think everybody can relate to it. My dad's like in his 60s, and he likes jazz stuff because he likes jazz. That's a good example. Pittsburgh probably is a jungle town for the simple reason that until the rave scene happened, there was no real nightlife here in Pittsburgh, whereas other cities had a lot of clubs and therefore house music was big, so that when the rave scene happened, house music kind of like, filtered into it from the get-go. People were used to house music, whereas here, people had no exposure to that. The first exposure they had to electronic music in a lot of cases was breakbeat or later on jungle. So Pittsburgh is somewhat of a jungle town. Whenever I'm out of Pittsburgh and somebody says, "Oh, where are you from?" and I tell them, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's where Dieselboy's from, and yeah, that's where Sine's from, and that's it's a jungle town."
There's so many at this point, so many jungle DJs in Pittsburgh And I think that I think all styles are represented. So I would say that it's probably the same across the board. We have jump up DJs. We have DJs that spin tech step. We have DJs that spin mellow and jazzy. Well, we have across the board like all kinds of jungle DJs or drum and bass DJs, much in the same way that say New York would have them, or LA or DC or Baltimore, any of the other cities like that, Chicago. So I would say that we represent fully just as any other major city that has a jungle scene does.
Well, Pittsburgh's really weird because being that we're so far inland and we're not really close to any other major cities with the exception of Cleveland, we've always had a little distinct sound. We haven't really had a lot of stuff filter in from elsewhere. So therefore, the jungle that's spun here in a lot of cases generally ends up a little bit different from the jungle that's spun on the rest of the East Coast. Like I noticed that here at Jump Up is still really popular, whereas in a lot of other places, if I go to Philly, Jump Up isn't popular at all anymore hardly. It's all tech stuff, just about. So it's like, definitely Pittsburgh, because it's kind of geographically isolated, has a different sound than a lot of other places, simply because of that isolation somewhat.
I think it's better that the two scenes stay more congruent. I don't necessarily believe that there should be a distinction between the rave quote unquote scene and the drum and bass scene, because it's all culled from the same ideas and the same beliefs.
It all comes down to origins. The origins of jungle here were at the time that jungle came out here. That was the beginning of the rave scene, basically. It came from breakbeat, and so the rave scene and breakbeat started at the same time. Whereas in New York, the rave scene had started, and it was mostly a house kind of oriented scene. And then somewhere, I guess around 94, 95, they discovered jungle. Well, meanwhile, we've been in the jungle we've been in the breakbeat or later on jungle for at least 2 years before New York. Therefore, there was a whole separate scene that had developed in New York because, these were people that were fed up with just going to parties and hearing house or techno. So they sprung off and they started doing jungle. They had heard jungle, they'd been playing jungle at home, and they all decided, let's band together, start throwing a few parties. Here, since jungle was always part of the parties to begin with, and in fact was the music at parties, there was no real differentiation between the two.
Personally, in Pittsburgh, considering the number of people that support parties, I really wouldn't want there to be like a total split, the jungle and the rave scene. If I had my way, the rave scene and jungle scene would be the same thing. Like people would like all the music, but unfortunately, you're gonna have people that only like house, or people that only like techno, or people that only like jungle, and they don't want to listen to anything else. Like I said, if I had my way, everyone would like everything, so we could have like just a joint scene. But I think at this point there aren't enough people going to parties where a split would be good, because it's just going to end up hurting the promoters, because they won't be able to bring in like the expensive DJs or the out-of-town DJs, because no one's going to show up for the party. So
yes, it's got this background where it's like a tight, clicky sort of thing, but it's rave music. I mean, like jungle music, it came from breakbeat, which is rave music, and I think it should remain in the environment that it was meant for, which is like a rave environment. And like I said, like Damien said, people should just learn to appreciate, or it'd be nice to see people appreciate all different types of techno music, not just 4/4 house, not just funky breaks, but all like across the gamut. And
well, I mean, I've been to like all jungle parties, and they definitely aren't a bad thing. But what I was talking about was definitely in Pittsburgh. At this point, there aren't enough people, and that would really hurt, like the scene, like the music scene, or the underground music scene in general. And so I don't think it's a good idea for Pittsburgh. But I'm definitely not against like all jungle events. I mean, those are good if people turn out for them.
Certain people are into certain things and certain people aren't. I think that it's good, for there to be all house parties and good for there to be all jungle parties. But I think it's definitely a good thing that they're together, because it exposes people to other, kinds of music. People who get into jungle and come to a party to hear jungle are then exposed to house and techno and trance and things like that, and they can they may learn to appreciate it. They may decide they hate it, whatever, but at least they're exposed to it. I know that I never would have been exposed to jungle if jungle wasn't being played at parties. I would have just or it would have taken a lot longer.
I'll be honest, sometimes I feel it would be great if you could basically split the scene into jungle, and there have been jungle parties, and they've attracted a different crowd somewhat than the raves have. You know, it was a little bit more diverse. I went to a jungle party that was at CMU, and it was a complete different thing. It was jungle and hip hop. And we've had quite a few parties where like jungle, hip hop, and dancehall. They got a different crowd than, you know, jungle raves, let's say, okay? I kind of say that that would be a good thing in that we get a lot of new people from other scenes. But at the same time, jungle, because it evolved from the rave scene, it's going to always be somewhat tied to it. And to be honest with you, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Just because the media decides to stereotype the scene and, you know, dwell on the negative aspects of it, it doesn't mean that we should go and say, oh, well, you know, we don't want to be associated with the rave scene anymore just because they've done that. For every groundbreaking, progressive musical scene that this country or any other country's ever had, there have been people in the media that have downed it. And I mean, you can go back to rock and roll. You can go to when hip hop started. You know, they always bring out the worst in what is going on. And so it's only natural that they're going to do it with jungle or they're going to do it, you know, with the rave scene. It wouldn't matter. If we did split off, I'm sure they would find something in the jungle scene for them to look at and you know, make it into a stigma. So basically, no, I think jungle's fine as it is. I'm kind of glad it stayed somewhat within the rave scene because at this stage, I don't think there's that much of an appeal outside of the rave scene to carry it by itself. Maybe in a few years, I noticed a lot of people that are into hip hop are starting to get into it. So maybe in a few years, you know, that's a possibility. But so far, I think it would be better to keep it as it is because if you split the scene, then you're going to split the amount of people, and that's no fun.
Well, as far as jungle goes, I think that, you know, I've met girls that are totally into jungle more so than like a lot of guys I know. You know, I've met like a lot of guys that are into jungle, but why is there a differentiation between like, you know, like girls and boys? Like, why is it mostly a male sound? I don't know. I think there's definitely a large chunk of jungle which is very aggressive sounding, and as a whole, guys tend to get into aggressive music more so than girls do. I think that jungle is like, you know, British hip hop. It's like British is, you know, their answer to hip hop. It's you know, hip hop is more of a male sound, and I think that jungle therefore is more of a male sound.
I would say that it's probably more of a guy thing, but only because it seems to me that a lot of things that are technically involved, a lot of times girls are socialized at a young age to not want to be interested in them. Now, I will say this, in Pittsburgh, we probably have, well, we have two female jungle DJs, and that's a great thing, and there'll probably be a few more. But the thing is, I don't think that our scene here is any more sexist than any other scene. And if you look at the scene in the UK, they still I can only think of 3, maybe 4 female jungle DJs in all of the UK, and they've got even more DJs than we can shake a glow stick at. All right, so basically the way I look at it is, it's not sexist. It's just the society in general tends to basically make girls think that, well, it's not necessarily a good thing to be involved in something that's that technical. And I definitely would say that, that Pittsburgh's jungle scene isn't sexist for the fact that DJ Adair, you know, she just started spinning not too long ago, and she's already, you know, one of the more sought after DJs. If it were sexist, then she would have never been, you know, given that break. I don't think it's sexist at all.
I don't think the scene is sexist at all, really. For the most part, people are very excited whenever they see someone spinning, a girl especially. You know what I mean? Like when they see a female spinning, they're like, wow, this is really interesting, and they just go up and, you know, just check her skills out and stuff. So they like that. I think to be a DJ in general, you need to have certain qualities, namely confidence. And you have to feel powerful, really. You know what I mean? To be able to play in front of all those people, you know, many people. But with a girl, I mean, she has to have those qualities too. She has to feel very confident, and she has to feel very powerful. But at the same time, she needs to balance those qualities with her feminine qualities, beauty and grace. You know, and so whenever she can combine all those qualities, the masculine qualities and the feminine qualities, you know, that's when she can be a candidate, I think, to be a female DJ, really. But I think most females are pretty intimidated. You know what I mean? They don't want to get up there and play in front of all those people because they don't have like certain masculine qualities, I call them, that I think you need to be successful. Because you have to be strong, you know.
I totally respect her because she always had wanted to do this, and then, you know, basically she did it. She went out and did it and didn't care, you know, what anybody thought. She's like, I'm gonna spin jungle. I love jungle. I'm gonna spin it. I'm gonna do it, and I'm just not gonna care. And the thing was, people respect her for that.
When people see females spinning, I think they expect to see less. They expect to see someone just getting up there and mixing one record to the other, one record to the other. You know what I mean? Like not doing anything. But if you can get up there, and like scratch or cut, you know what I mean, or just get into it, and, you know, in general, people will be like, wow, what is that? You know what I mean? What's going on here?
Because she's got her own style. She does these things where she'll cut over to the other record, and there'll be like a crazy sound there, and it just jumps out at you. So she's respected because she has her own style. She has her own way about her. You know, she gets up behind the turntables, and you're not at all expecting the kind of music to come out that comes out. And you think, okay, she's gonna spin jazz stuff or intelligent just from the way she looks, and then you get the hardest, darkest jungle in existence. You know, it's like it's great. I think that's her style. People love it. People love her for it.
I think in Pittsburgh, as far as like who's interested in jungle music, it's primarily a white thing. Only because, you know, the jungle scene in Pittsburgh is tied pretty heavily with the rave scene, and a lot of ravers are white. A lot of people that are into like hip hop are black. So I mean, I don't know. Like right now in Pittsburgh, I mean, there are a mix of different like ethnicities. You know, you have Asian people that are in the jungle, blacks, you know, Latino, whites, whatever. But it's primarily white. The jungle scene as a whole in the U.S., it depends on location. For example, in L.A., most of the junglists are Latino. In New York City, I'd say there's a pretty even mix of white and black, you know, junglists. In the UK, it's probably, depends on the style. Definitely with like with raga and jump up jungle or drum and bass, it's more of a black thing. When you get into the darker stuff, I'd say it's more of a white thing. It's more of like a techno influence, and I think that the techno scene, even though it might have been derived from black culture or blacks in Detroit, that techno's just like a white music, or perceived as such. Most people that are into that kind of music tend to be white.
I think basically music is music, but if you were going to say, you know, what is jungle more of, I would say that it's probably more of a black form of music than I don't know. I don't want to say it's a blacker form of music than techno, because techno originated in Detroit by, you know, a group of black musicians. But I would say that it's probably blacker in terms of its influence, because Detroit techno is influenced by like a lot of craft work and things like that, whereas jungle was influenced by hip hop. It was also influenced a lot by reggae, and those are considered black, forms of music. As far as in what I know about the UK, I do know that it's definitely considered a blacker form of music in the UK, mainly because it's an urban form of music in the UK. Here it's a suburban form of music, so therefore I wouldn't say that people look at it as a black or white music, but I would say that it's probably an alternative music, and therefore it would be considered a whiter form of music in America. I don't look at music in terms of racial makeup, but I would say that the crowd at jungle events tends to be a lot more ethnically, racially diverse than at a lot of just regular techno raves.
Yeah, I think that the jungle scene tends to be a little bit older. Especially the DJs have been around a lot longer. I think I would be the exception, being only 20, but generally the people, like Dieselboy and 187, they're all older DJs.
A lot of times when people my age, that aren't into the scene hear about raves, we just think of a bunch of crazy, kids we're not necessarily gonna want to go to it. If I weren't a DJ and if I knew nothing about the scene, I would just think that it was a scene full of teenagers, and a lot of times older people don't necessarily want to be around kids. So it's a self-fulfilling thing. Because there are a lot of kids, a lot of times older people, shy away from going. But I've seen that change a little bit in the last year, and like you said, there was that party where there were a lot of older people, and there are a lot of older people now that listen to jungle. So I think that's starting to turn around, and that's nationwide. I've noticed that in a lot of places I've been. But New York and San Francisco are like older, more established scenes in general, so you have older people that go. Okay, to talk about drugs and parties, I just want to say that drugs and parties go kind of hand in hand back to before time itself. I mean, people have always taken some form of substance, be it alcohol, be it cigarettes, be it whatever, And so when we talk about drugs, a lot of times people just think of illegal drugs, but in terms of taking something as a social lubricant in order to, not everybody is an open person, and I think that drugs do play a role in opening people up. At the same time, that said, I think that, like anything else, if it's overdone, it's definitely a bad thing, and a lot of times kids tend to overdo things.
I think that certain drugs have taken sort of a hold on this scene in particular here in Pittsburgh and a lot of scenes around the country, drugs that I don't think are as positive as the drugs that people were doing back in the day. They might have been around back in the day, but they weren't quite as popular, and you didn't see as many people doing them in excess the way they're doing them now.
When people are on E, everyone's like, happy and hugging each other. So if you have like an E problem, at least people are going to be energetic and happy. Yeah. Whereas if you have a special K problem, people are going to be slouching corners like, drool hanging off the side of their mouth like totally in a K-hole. I mean, how exciting is that?
I think that to a certain extent drugs do pollute the scene. I think that, drugs have a tendency to pollute a lot of things. It's how well they're used and how intelligently they're used. I think that, unfortunately, a lot of younger people that have gotten involved in it, have done these things without knowing what, the implications of, these drugs are, how they react to you and how you react to them. And I think that, people can have bad experiences on them, and that in turn, creates a bad experience for the scene as a whole.
The drugs that I've seen as far as in use at, parties that are primarily jungle, generally aren't hard drugs. They're, maybe marijuana, somebody smoking a joint, but, basically things like that. Maybe an occasional E. But no, as far as like, other, mostly techno house events, I've seen a lot of other harder substances. So I would say that that's one thing where you can draw the line, in Pittsburgh and a lot of other places between the two scenes. But I don't want to dwell on drug use because I see that as a really minor part of the scene. Most of the people that I know that go to parties necessarily don't go to the parties to use drugs. They go there for the music.
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody who wants to be honest is going to deny that there's drug use in the rave scene. But then again, anybody who wants to be honest won't deny that there's going to be there's drug use at Grateful Dead shows and drug use
The rock scene.
in the rock scene, you know.
The Hollywood scene. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, out in Hollywood. Yeah, that's the thing. And I think that what the media is trying to do and what the media does with many things is they'll take a bad aspect that's sensationalistic and they'll blow it up and they'll focus on it and they'll try to draw people's attention to it, and that makes them money and it makes them look good, like they're really reporting something, you know, that's like has substance, when really it's no worse or no better than anything else. I mean, you don't see people doing, you know what I mean? It's like you don't see reports all the time about Grateful Dead shows and how many people take acid, but I think we can all pretty much guess there's a lot of acid taken in Grateful Dead shows. It's just like, you know, it's sensationalist journalism and it sells. Like
How exciting is it to say, hey, kids get together and dance all night?
I think the rave scene's definitely been singled out by the media insofar as, you know, you see things all the time on the television or read it in the paper about how horrible this is. People are dying on drugs and this and that. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, drugs at a party are, you know, not what people go there for. People go there to dance and, you know, to hear good music. There's more drugs on, you know, your average city block, you know, in some, you know, some U.S. cities than there are at parties. And I think that that the media should focus their attention on the fact that there are, you know, a couple thousand crack babies being born every day and people are dying of heroin overdoses and, you know, crazy stuff that nobody cares to hear about, where, you know, they're going to single out a scene where, you know, one or two people have had bad experiences on drugs that they didn't know what they were taking when they took them, and they did all the wrong things while they were on them. You know, if you're going to take a methamphetamine, then you should drink a lot of water and you shouldn't overheat yourself. And if you're going to do one, then you should know this, and, you know, you shouldn't take things that you don't know what they are and how they're going to affect you.
I wouldn't say it's polluted the scene. I think that drug use has definitely polluted certain people that have caused them to, you show up at a party and the people that were there, 2 months ago dancing their asses off are now sitting around totally cracked off their faces. They're just like sitting there, and eventually those people kind of drop out of the scene. So it definitely affects certain people. As far as the scene, I guess if everyone's cracked out at a party, and in Manhattan, like, there aren't a lot of parties going on, and like over like a 5-month period, every party people are like all cracked out, then yeah, I guess you could say it's affecting the scene. It's kind of everyone. There's no vibe.
I think there's been points where the scene has been polluted, but I think that we've come back from that. I mean, I know when I through my party, I made very sure that there wasn't anything that wasn't kosher there. And I think that has a lot to do. It's the promoter's responsibility to make sure that there aren't fucked up drugs there, and that people aren't gonna lose their mind or go to the hospital or get naked or do anything crazy. They need to, because the promoters are ultimately the ones that are responsible for the people there. You're saying come and dance, and I'm gonna make sure that you're doing it in a safe environment, and if you don't, then it's on your head.
It's a total misconception that there's more drugs in the rave scene than there are anywhere else. People just associate drugs with the rave scene. I saw somebody outside my window yesterday and today selling crack on the street. So people think that people aren't going to work, going to school, laying around their houses on drugs. They are. I'm here to tell you, I know people who aren't in the rave scene who do drugs. I know people who are in the rave scene who do drugs. Drugs are everywhere, and to single out the rave scene and say that just because it's a rave scene there's more people doing drugs it's just a farce. Yeah, we pat people down coming into our parties. If we find anything, we flush it. It's not something that I want, but you also can't sit there and do a cavity search of everybody that's coming in. It's just, you're not talking about smuggling a case of beer into a party. You're talking about 100 e-pills can fit into a bag, plastic baggie shoved in somebody's shoe. There's nothing we can do about that. It's not something that I encourage at all, but it's there. I can't single anybody out and strip search somebody. I don't have that authority to do that. I mean, if from a simple pat down, looking for weapons or drugs, I don't find anything. There's nothing I can do. You know, I'm not going to sit there with, you know, drug sniffing dogs or anything like that, because that's going to take away from the party. You're there to have fun. If somebody's bringing something into the party, you know, that's I'm not going to cross the line and go into, you know, being what we're against, which is, you know, intrusion and everything like that. It's about freedom and it's about having fun. And if that's what those people are going to do to have fun, then that's what they're going to do. And I'm not going to, you know, make it worse for the other 99% of the people that are there to have to hand search everybody and go out of control for it. That's not why I'm doing this. So you know, I'll never do that, even though, you know, I have a pretty good idea what goes on.
The way I see it as far as DJs and drug use, you know, during, before, or after their sets, I would say that here in America, you know, most of the DJs that I know and I have contact with don't. It's as simple as that, because you want your skills to be at the optimum. You don't want them to be clouded. There's a few that may smoke an occasional joint, but as far as some of the DJs that I met from the UK, they get completely plastered in a lot of cases before they go on, and they can't understand why we don't. They're like, wow, you guys are so uptight. But it's a different world there, so I'm not gonna, you know, down them for that. If they can carry the day with their skills, you know, on tons of E, then so be it. Me personally, I'd rather be straight, you know, and do what I have to do than to be fucked up and fuck up.
I've seen DJs perform on drugs. For the most part, they've performed not as well as they could have if they had been sober. There are definitely certain DJs out there in the scene now that are known for being fucked up when they spin, and a lot of those DJs actually get about this much respect from most people. I've spun while intoxicated. It definitely is more difficult. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, so there have been times I've spun intoxicated where I kind of like caught a certain vibe off the crowd, and it helped me, you know, present my set a certain way. And it's definitely like, it was like I've spent some of the best hits of my life while messed up, but I don't think it's a good idea.
I don't know anybody personally who says to themselves before they go up, I'm gonna get so ripped, because it's just, you know, it's not really the point. Afterwards, maybe, but you know, beforehand or during, you know, I definitely think that, you know, DJs are more likely to, you know, to have a beer than they are to, you know, do some other substance. I would say that the definition of a good drum and bass DJ to me is someone who plays a variety of styles, who can really take the listener somewhere, plays on the cutting edge, because that's what the music is, and it is willing to put his neck out, you know, to play a couple tunes every time he spins, because it's, you know, yeah, it's nice to be safe and it's nice to be comfortable, but it's also nice to break, you know, a new style. And I think that people who aren't living up to what the music can do, and aren't, you know, taking full advantage of the of you know, what we have to work with. I mean, you can take people from heaven to hell in the space of 2 records. You know, it's all how you put them together, and you really need to understand that. You really need to work that. You know what I mean? You need to not only move people and to make them dance, but you need to take them somewhere once you have them moving.
my role as a DJ, I think, is it's probably twofold. I mean, I think that I'm there as an entertainer to, you know, give people, you know, Dieselboy's version of drum and bass, or the kind of music that he feels that, you know, they should be hearing at a party, something that's going to move them. And I think nowadays in the scene, for me, I'm also there to push jungle and to be an influence for jungle on people that might not really know much about it, or might be kind of like new to the scene and are trying to like get into the music. So I think I have a role to represent jungle. But as far as being a DJ goes, I mean, I don't know. I guess you could say that I'm an entertainer. I mean, it's once you get into especially like the business side of things, you realize that my role as a DJ is almost like someone's role, like being in a band who's going on the road. They're touring. They have like promoters throwing events where they perform. They are working on their own tracks and they're trying to get their stuff out to the people. And I mean, it's just like being in a band, except I guess I'm just a one-man band with records.
My live show generally goes keyboard, sampler, rack units of effects, and a mixer. The point of my show is to show that, you know, while this is computerized music, it can still be played live. And in fact, I can do basically what a DJ does live. And I've done whole shows just on the keyboard. What you saw the other night was something new that I've tried out, which is spinning and playing live. Basically, I can pitch control everything on the keyboard to like match to records and go back and forth. I just learned how to do that, so that's the whole point. The whole point of that was to show that, you know, while the music may be somewhat computerized, there's a human being behind it. It's not just, you know, these static records that somebody's spinning. It's something that somebody can create and go out and play just like a band or whatever.
On the blocks, what's gonna be next? I'm knocking out the box. Music interchanges and intertwines on the blocks.
This is what jungle's made on. This is you know, the last step in the process. This is where it's all put together. This is what gives it that futuristic, you know, sound. This is the gear that makes the sounds. And
It's definitely easier to move a crowd and to take them where you want to go at a much quicker pace, spinning drum and bass than spinning trance or breaks or house or anything like that. It's because the music is so fast paced. You can make decisions on the fly. You know, you can change the mood like that, like instantly. You can take it to a point and then just stop it and take it in a whole another direction. And that's one of the beauties of drum and bass, is because it's such an instantaneous, change. I mean, you can change moods in the space of a couple measures, with drum and bass, or a couple of seconds. Whereas with trance, you have to really build it, and you have to, it's a much more involved form of music insofar as building a set. With drum and bass, you can really just drop tunes. You can read a crowd and say, okay, this is going to work here, and then do it, and be like, okay, now let's take it here. And it's a much more fast-paced, full contact form of DJing, if you will.
When I spin, I would say definitely get a sense of satisfaction, knowing that people are at a party to have a good time, and you're providing them a good time, or you're helping them have a good time, and especially when they yell or scream or compliment you after your set, they really show their appreciation for what you've done. I mean, it's such a good feeling, like you've really done something good, and you feel proud, a good sense of pride. I mean, I guess, I don't know. There's definitely a rush. I mean, when you're playing and people are yelling, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it feels really good.
It's like nothing else I've ever really experienced. It's probably one of the best feelings. It's something you can do naturally, without any, bizarre side effects. You just get up there and you take people on a journey. Usually when I step up to the decks, I know what I'm going to do. I put my first record down and I'm saying, here I am, you're mine for the next hour, 2 hours, whatever I'm spinning for. And it's just, it's a rush to look out over a crowd and see, their reaction to a new tune, and just, if they, when they freak out, or it's just, I don't know, it's like nothing I've ever experienced before, just to look out over 800 or 1,000 people moving, it's just incredible. Got goosebumps,
There's a rush of performing. It's kind of like adrenaline rush. You're like, are people going to get into this? I mean, before you spin, there's all these expectations, what's going to happen. And then as you're spinning, you're always watching for the crowd, especially when people are dancing. I really get into it. When I see that people are feeling how I'm feeling towards the music, it's really exciting. It's really exhilarating, because you like this sound and it really makes you excited, and then you play it for someone else and you're like, God, I hope they get into this. And when they do, it's just so exhilarating. You're like, wow, they're feeding off this exactly the same way I am. And to me, that's the best thing. That's what makes DJing for me.
Out of doing a live gig for me is probably a little bit different than doing a live gig as a DJ. I get the rush of taking things that are just on tape or just on vinyl and playing them out totally live, where I can totally change the structure of it and totally throw people for a loop. Wow, where'd that come from? Gee, there's a little bit of the Beastie Boys in it. Where'd that come from? That's not in the version that I heard. It's like a whole different kind of thing. And it's a rush that you get from realizing that you got 100 people or 10,000 all dancing to something that you made in your bedroom. That's insane. I mean, you look at it and you go, wow, I just did that. I made this.
I think a DJ or DJs can mold taste, but I think that in the scene, the people that actually do most of the molding are the promoters, because, say for example, you're living in the town, there's one promoter who's throwing all the parties because he's got or she's got all the money, and they bring in only house DJs. Then a lot of kids' tastes are going to be molded towards house music, whereas if the guy was bringing in jungle, then maybe their taste would be molded towards jungle. So I think promoters have more of a hand in that sort of thing. I mean, a DJ does to an extent, but it's all going to depend on what's going on in your area or what you have access to. If you're stuck in a town and you can't leave and you're stuck with whatever promoter's going to bring in, it's kind of hard to have your taste molded to jungle if all you're hearing is techno every weekend. So I'd say that the promoters got more of a hand in that.
I wouldn't say that we're the cultural elite at all. I don't think we're elite. I think that the simple. We're just simple people that, you know, bring music to people that love music. And, you know, if that's an elite thing, I guess so, but I don't think it's elite. I would say that, if anything, jungle DJs are you know, they're just people that are trying to get their sound out there.
I don't think so. I think a lot of people would like to earmark us as the rock stars of the next century. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that, you know, we're just people playing records. You know, the records we get maybe make us elite. You know I get a lot of records that, you know, other people don't. But as far as, you know, being better or being, you know, an upper class, I don't really think you could put us in that category. We're just people doing, you know, what we like to do, and that's making people dance. You know, and if people want to, you know, peg us as something that we're not, then that's on them. It's, you know, I don't know anybody out there who's saying, I'm a DJ, you know, I'm this, I'm that, I'm better than you. It's, you know, it's not about that. It's, you know, I think, you know, that's proven at parties. People can come up to you after you're done and talk to you, and you know, ask you what records you played and this and that, and, you know, it's, you know, it's a comfortable setting. It's not like trying to get, you know, an autograph from Guns N' Roses, you know, after a show. It's a much more relaxed setting. It's much more fun.
Yeah, I would say turntable musician is probably a lot more descriptive than cultural elite, because basically that's what they're doing. You know, they're basically doing with turntables. They're doing with turntables something that's very musical, something that's very progressive, something that, you know, 20 years ago people wouldn't have even imagined. You know, so basically, yeah, I would say turntable musician, turntable artist, turntable performance artist. Yeah, that's what a DJ is. People look up to them, you know, even more so now. A lot of kids look up to DJs like rock stars. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think that most of us are pretty down-to-earth people if you come up and talk to us. We don't conduct ourselves as such. My personal opinion is that jungle has not reached its peak. And the reason I say that is because there's so many other things, there's so many other areas that jungle could go into, and it is right now. You know, and that's one of the things that makes jungle different from other forms of dance music to me, is that it's constantly evolving. You know, once one thing becomes established, something else splits off, and there's yet another subgenre of jungle created. It may never, quote-unquote, reach its peak. It may just keep getting bigger and bigger.
I think jungle's always going to change. I mean, the stuff that's out now, like the progressive stuff, which is tech step, I mean, that's definitely a lot different than a lot of stuff that was coming out, say, a year before. I just think jungle, the whole idea of it, is that it's going to change. I mean, that people get bored. I mean, people are gonna make it progress. I don't think that they've run out of things to do with jungle. I can't predict what the next big thing's going to be. But I definitely don't think that it's run its course yet, and I think it's going to constantly change.
As long as people are still willing to push their, you know, push the threshold of thought and to push the threshold of imagination, there's no reason for it to slow down. I mean, music companies are constantly putting out new forms of you know, sound technology, new keyboards and new samplers, and, you know, there's always going to be people there to exploit it. I mean, the music is based around beats, and beats are infinite. They've from tribal drumming circles in Africa to marching bands in, you know, Wisconsin. It's music based around beats, and jungle takes all of them and puts them in a blender and comes out with a whole new form every time.
I think things over the next year are going to be interesting. Well, one of the most interesting developments this year in '97 is that MTV's now playing jungle. That was, to me, unimaginable a year ago. And so a lot of people were going to be exposed to it. They may be more inclined to go out and buy the music. I see that as a good thing.
I like the fact that MTV runs AMP. You can go home and turn it on and see music videos that techno artists have created for their music. It's, you know, it's incredible.
Any form of jungle that becomes mainstream is only going to split something else off that will be underground. Jungle's bigger than the label mainstream or underground. It has the capacity to be both at the same time. And in fact, in the UK, it's mainstream and underground. In the US, it's just now starting to become mainstream. I'm not afraid of that at all. Like I said, anything that becomes popular, basically is going to split something else off that'll be the new underground. And that's what'll keep it evolving. One good thing that would happen as far as, it becoming mainstream is that, well, but for producers like me that have been doing this for, years and years, it'll enable me to maybe write better tracks because I'll have better access to better equipment, and that can only be a good thing. I mean, that's my look at it. As far as where the music may go this year, I believe that it's going to get a lot noisier. Yeah, it's going to get a lot noisier. That's why tech step is so popular.
I think that in '97 there's going to be a lot more interest in jungle because a lot of like major players, MTV, magazines, stuff like that, people are going to really jump onto it and grab it. I think it's going to generate a lot more interest. What Pittsburgh needs is someone to come along, like another UDG, someone who's going to sit there, fully loves jungle, and they're going to support it fully, be it all jungle parties or parties that are going to have a jungle room or something like that. We're going to need a promoter in the scene who really, truly, lives, breathes, eats, drinks jungle. It's going to have to push it.
There's going to probably be another label starting up over the next year. I'm not too sure of the particulars about it. I do know that several people have expressed interest in it, and I've also been approached by the label that I'm on in New York for all Pittsburgh jungle compilation of producers. The only problem that we've had so far is there haven't been enough people making tracks. So hopefully over the next year there'll be enough tracks to actually put out a compilation. And I think that would do a lot to promote the scene here because if you walk in a store and you see a CD of all these people that are from your place, you're going to be that much more inclined to go see them at a party.
I think that as with all scenes, the Pittsburgh scene needs to get away from the nonsense and get back to what's really important, and that's the music. I think kids who may go to parties and spend their money on drugs and things like that and, really not have, an idea of what's, really happening should maybe go out and buy, an herb magazine or a mix magazine and, check out what's really going on with their scene, go to the record store, buy a record, buy some CDs. I think people need to get involved in the music because that's ultimately what it's about. I mean, the scene's going to get to a point where you're not going to go to raves anymore. It's going to be played at, clubs and things like that, and raves are going to become a thing of the past or a thing of the, the elite, which, it may be good, may be bad, but you're going to need to know what's going on with the music in order to know what clubs you want to go to. And in order to be an educated, techno listener, I think that you need to be on top of these things. You need to know what's going on. And it in turn, it's a reflection on the scene too. If you have educated people going to parties, you have better parties. You have better music at the parties. If people know what they're getting into, it gives the promoters a chance to go out and talk to people and say, what kind of music do you like? What DJs do you like? But if people don't know, then the promoters can't find out. So you end up with parties that, are all DJs that the promoters are into, which isn't always the best thing.
I don't know, like on the horizon, especially in light of, how things have been going recently, I hope to definitely stick with it, hopefully get even bigger, eventually get to producing my own tracks, get signed to like a really good label, because I think that once I start producing my own tracks, if they're good, I can get myself booked in other countries. I would definitely like to go to Japan, England, just, get out of the U.S., France, for instance. But definitely want to experience other countries, Europe, so on and so forth, and the only way I'm ever going to get there is by producing.
Personally, I want to take my music and my DJing to the furthest levels that I possibly can. I'm getting into producing. I want to get some records out. I want to, bring, my brand of drum and bass to more people. And, I'm just going to work as hard as I need to work, to get it to that level, hand out as many tapes as I need to, work on as many tunes as I need to take it to that point. I think, ultimately, producing is what every DJ wants to do. They want to be able to go into the studio and make the tunes that they want to play. You don't have to, buy somebody else's. I think that's, that's where I want to be.
I want to be able to play stadiums in the year 2001. I want complete, total world domination. I want drum and bass to be on every stereo, Walkman, car radio, and boom box in existence. No, but to be serious though, personally, it doesn't matter. I've done just about everything I wanted to do. I started playing, I never told you this, but I started playing just because I didn't have enough money to get into parties. I was skint, flat, broke. And I said, well, gee, if I can contribute something to the scene, maybe I can do that. And then I can go to all these great parties. And the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing now is something that's completely, it would have been completely unimaginable to me a few years ago. So who knows, 5 years, who knows where things might be. Personally, I just want to continue making music that I like, continue making music that people like. Hopefully they'll like it. If not, I'll probably still be making music. If it goes anywhere, then great. If it doesn't, I'll still be making music. That's the way it's always been for me, no matter what I've been doing.